And in these two cases, we see the relationship between the inverse cotangent x and the inverse tangent of the 1 over x, right? So now let's summarize these facts. So actually, you have this relationship between the inverse cotangent of x and the inverse tangent of 1 over x. So inverse cotangent x and when x is positive, as in the first case, we know this is equal to inverse tangent of 1 over x. So when x is positive, and when x is less than 0, then you have the inverse cotangent of x equal to inverse tangent of the 1 over x plus pi. And when x is equal to 0, then inverse cotangent of 0 is just equal to half pi. Okay, because you have the cotangent of the half pi is equal to 0, right? The cosine half pi is equal to 0. So the cotangent of half pi is equal to 0. Any question? And this is kind of tricky and confusing, so you must read this for quite a few times and try to understand it. Okay, and this is also an important relationship between the inverse cotangent of x and the inverse tangent of the 1 over x. Okay, especially when the x is negative. Okay, this inverse cotangent of x is equal to inverse tangent of the 1 over x plus pi. Now let's look at the graph of the inverse cotangent and inverse tangent. This is graph of the inverse tangent, and this is graph of the inverse cotangent. And let me copy the graph of the inverse tangent and then paste this to this rectangular plane. So we have the graph of the inverse tangent like this. Okay. Now, to get the graph of the y equal to negative inverse tangent x, we need to reflect this blue graph about the x-axis to get the graph of this negative inverse tangent of x. Right, now let's reflect this guy about this x-axis, then we get a graph like this. So this is graph of the y equal to negative inverse tangent of x. Now you compare the graph of this y equal to negative inverse tangent x and the graph of the inverse cotangent x. How do you get the graph of the inverse cotangent x from the graph of this function? How? Shift, right, upward by half pi units. If you shift this brown one upward by half pi units, then you get the graph of the y equal to inverse cotangent of x. So this process just illustrates this relationship. We have the cotangent, okay, inverse cotangent x equal to this guy shift upward, okay, by half pi units. So you have the half pi plus this guy. And then we get the relationship between the inverse tangent and the inverse cotangent. And this holds for any x, okay, for any real number x. So this is a very important relationship between the inverse cotangent and inverse tangent. Or you may memorize this identity in such a way: the sum of the inverse cotangent and the inverse tangent is equal to half pi. Okay, memorize this. This is a very important formula. Let's look at some problems. Let's go to the page 485, problem 34. And we need to evaluate the inverse cotangent of 1 over root of 3. What is this angle? So this is equal to inverse cotangent of the root of 3 over 3. For which angle between the 0 and pi whose cotangent is equal to root of 3 over 3? Pi over what? Pi over 3, right? So that is 60 degrees. Pi over 3. Because cotangent of the pi over 3 is equal to root of 3 over 3. You see, for this type of the problems, you must memorize the function values for those, okay, most common used angles. Right. And also this pi over 3 is really in the range of this inverse cotangent from the 0 to pi. Right. Now let's look at the 38. Arc tangent of -1 over root of 3. So this same as the inverse tangent of -1 over the root of 3. So this guy, we can first rationalize this, right? This is equal to the negative root of 3 over 3. What is angle? Pi over what? What is angle? You must be able to speak out this answer without any hesitation. Okay, get used to them. Right now you found it's difficult, but after you do enough exercise, then you will get used to all the things. And we know we have the tangent pi over 6 equal to root of 3 over 3, right? Right now this is negative. So, and the range for the inverse tangent is from the negative half pi to half pi. So this guy is equal to negative pi over 6. Because tangent of the negative pi over 6 is equal to negative root of 3 over 3. And also the negative pi over 6 belongs to this range, right?